charity in Africa, for instance. And they're, surrounded by grateful children and that kind of thing.
Right.
And I don't know. I don't know. As an atheist, it would be very easy for me to say, well, the price for getting fed is to convert and that kind of thing. They were out trying to deliberately convert. I personally don't have any evidence that was the case. They were basically there for the best of intentions. Maybe I'm naive. I don't know. But I know there are certain cases where there is some, and I think you have said so yourself, that there are certain areas where they have done very good work in terms of charity and that kind of thing. But I guess you're remarking across the board, though, more from a total perspective.
Well, think about this. Think about it. Even if you could show scientifically that people who belong to churches are more likely to behave generously toward other people than people who don't belong to churches, that could be true. That is conceivable that that's actually true.
Right.
But even then, see, the implication of this work, like Putnam and Campbell and these sociologists, their implication is that being generous, the religious participation is what caused these people to become more generous. That religion is a good influence.
Right.
But when you think about the correlational methodology that they're using here, they haven't shown a causal relationship between the church participation and the generosity.
Right.
So imagine we're in this society where it's common knowledge, most people know that religion is a good way to get generous things done.
Yes.
And now imagine that we have part of our population is more generous, naturally more generous than the rest of us, let's say. There are some people who are naturally more generous. Well, those naturally more generous people are going to be slightly more attracted to religious participation than the more stingy people, because they've heard that going to a church is the best way to get the generous things done that they like to get done.
There's a great...
So that would imply...
Well, there's a great quote by and I'm not going to, I can't remember it verbatim, but there's a great quote by the late and great Christopher Hitchens, who said that in effect morality is not derived from religion but precedes it.
It precedes it, and so you could, even if you could show me some hard data that shows that people in churches are more likely to be generous than people outside churches, it might be that they're in the church because they're generous, rather than they're generous because they're in the church.
In other words, it's highly unlikely that a basically stingy or indifferent person would walk into a church and then all of a sudden be transformed into a loving giver.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when has that ever happened?
Roy, I want to go back to a statement in Chavez's paper, which you sent to us.
Okay.
It says the following: the median dollar amount spent by congregations directly in support of social service programs in 2006 and 7 was about $1,300. Okay, that means the average amount that a church spends on this stuff is about $1,300.
The median. Yeah.
Median. Okay. Follow on. It doesn't. Okay. It said this represents about 2% of the average congregation's total annual budget.
Yeah.
And as in our discussions we had before, we're saying about 98% of it covers things called worship services.
Yeah.
It covers the second item was the education of the people themselves.
Education in quotation marks. So it's like things like Sunday school.
Right. And the third item was the salaries and overhead of the staff. So what we're saying, all this money that the churches are generating and they're having, only about 2% of it, maybe even if it's wrong by a factor of 2, is 4%, 5%, is going to help this social welfare, helping people outside of their club, their own organization.
Right.
And the message I personally am trying to get across is, folks, they have exploded the quote unquote the good work they do, because all the time people tell us, well, religion does all this great work. You know, they're spending 98% or 96% of the money for themselves, and they're diddling out a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? And many times the things that they're doing, they're now getting faith-based initiatives that the government's paying for. So they'll run the soup kitchen. It's not the church who's doing it. It's us paying for that soup kitchen who's getting the money for it. And that's the message that I want to get across.
Yeah, that can be extremely misleading, because you can see a project that's called Catholic or Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever it is, and you think, oh, these Methodists are doing a lot of great stuff, but actually all their money comes from the federal government.
And as I said to you before, there's something called Catholic Charities.
Yeah.
Catholic Charities is the largest adoption agency in the United States. And they just had a scandal. I'll tell you what it's all about. Anyways, what happened is the federal government, Obama and company, now said that in the area of abortion, you cannot eliminate same-sex couples, gay couples, etc., for abortions. In other words,
You mean
have
adoptions?
I'm sorry, for adoptions.
Adoption,
Keep wrong, for adoption. So Catholic Charity, to fight it, said, okay, we're going out of the business of adoptions. Okay, so now you go find your own sources. Then someone started peeling back the onion and found out that $2 billion of the $4.6 billion came directly from the federal government to run the operation. They think another of the $2 billion come from state and local groups that support them, and only maybe a few $100 million come from donations of outsiders. So they're getting all the credit of doing all this great adoption work and social welfare, but really we're paying for that.
So this thing that's called Catholic Charities is not even really Catholic.
Well,
it's a non-profit organization, but it has very little connection with the Catholic Church.
Well, but they still follow Catholic principles, because they said
except they follow Catholic principles.
That's right.
But they don't. This isn't the Catholic Church spending billions of dollars to make up for a better society.
That's right.
That's not what's happening at all.
But the thing is, we're paying for them to get the credit for all the work they're doing.
Yeah.
And they get to violate the establishment clause in the process.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. You know, there's another way, if you're trying to study religion and generosity, there's another way that I found when I was searching the literature. You can study this another way. Instead of doing statistical studies on survey data and trying to correlate the numbers, there have been a few studies, just a few, where they have done behavioral studies in a naturalistic setting, more like a psychology experiment, where you put people into a setting and see what they do. So if you, in this kind of experiment, you would take people's word. When the people tell you how religious they are, you would take their word for it. But you don't take their word for how generous they are. You put them you give them a sort of a test. The most recent study like this that I saw was done in Virginia last year. They set up a situation where there's Alexandria, somewhere in Virginia, and they set up a station in a restaurant, and when people came to pay their checks, they gave them a little survey to fill out, and they checked the number, and they got the numbers of what they ate, what they paid, and how much of a tip they left. And then they collected data on how religious people were and what their experience was like in the restaurant. So they found that the people who had a better time at the restaurant, people who really enjoyed their meal, tended to tip a little more. It was actually a small effect. People tend to tip the same. Anyway, there's a small effect for people who enjoyed their meal more, tipped a little more. People who felt that their server had done a better job tipped a little more. And there were a couple other small effects. I think women tipped more than men. But then they looked for a correlation between religiosity, people who reported that they were religious versus non-religious, but the religious people didn't tip more.
Wow. Wow.
So they called it a field study, and I think that's really interesting, because you can take you know, you can figure if being religious means you're more generous, well, then you're probably going to be a bigger tipper. But it turns out you're not.
Well,
They left their money in the plate on Sunday, that's why.
that's what they left. Yeah.
Yeah.
In any case, I think we are running out of time, and you have given yours very generously. Roy, I hope that you will stay in touch with us.
We're going to call him back
and
now.
Yes, and we're going to call you back, and of course we're going to be doing a Q&A when this is shown in front of our New York City Atheists
generous
members.
audience.
Our generous audience. If you can survive a New York City Atheist audience, you can survive anything. It's whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Okay.
No, we'll be very glad to speak with you and get questions from the audience. And for those who are eventually going to see this on the internet, I just wanted just to say that you've been watching New York City Atheists live on tape, brought to you by New York City Atheists. Our guest has been Roy SABLOSKY, a self-styled amateur academic. All right, I've lost it. Academic. Okay, and who has been doing surveys on, been following up on surveys regarding the generosity or lack thereof, allegedly, of religious and non-religious people. Roy, thank you very much for joining us, and looking forward to speaking with you for tomorrow night.
Okay,
And,
I'll see you at the meeting.
Okay, and if you're ever in New York, you know, we'd love to have you drop in on
For
us.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Eventually going to see this on the internet. I just wanted just to say.
We can cut this here. We're going to set up now the live Q&A with him. Dennis, can we put some lights on? Okay, just it takes a couple of minutes. I'm going to contact him on the phone, and we'll have a live Q&A with Roy. A household survey. They take anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 households in the United States, and they randomly pick them across the country, and they interview them about the American life. For example, they'll check how many people in the household, their income level, a lot of how many automobiles they have a refrigerator. And one of the segments, one of the areas that they investigate is about religion. They'll ask them what religion they are, etc. But let me just explain. It's what they do. They physically interview these people for 45 minutes to an hour. They either go to the person's home, or if they can't reach them, they do it with a telephone. So it's about a 45-minute comprehensive interview with hundreds and hundreds of questions. As one of the segments, one of the sections of this University of Chicago survey, as I said, is about religion. So they start asking people about religion, and about half the people claim they're not religious, or do not have a religious affiliation, or especially are not associated with a church. When the person tells them they're associated with a church, they tell the University of Chicago survey what church they are associated with. Now, from those people that they tell him what church is associated with, he then picks those churches and contacts the church. This is the guy from Duke, Mark Chavez. So he does about 1,200 or 1,500 churches, synagogues, and mostly churches around the United States. I just want to make one comment about 1,200. If any of you are a mathematician, there's a magic number in a good survey of 1,200 people. You can go 2,000, 10,000, 100,000. You're not going to change your confidence level much greater than that. For example, when they do surveys about how people are going to vote, etc., they try to do it around 1,200 people because you got a pretty high confidence level. It's on, or it's like 3 sigma if you know anything about mathematics. So he does that. So now he interviews also the church leaders. And what he basically gets from the church leaders, he finds about their congregation sizes, he finds about their budget, etc. So he asks them a couple of questions. One is what's their total budget, and how much do they spend money-wise on the social services. That's how he got the number of $1,300 average. And then he knew what the total budget was, which, whatever it was, he divides the $1,300 in the total budget, about 32%. So that's pretty accurate. And he's very well versed in this. I mean, he's extremely confident. This is a very representative number of what religious organizations, institutions are putting into this area. Roy, do you have any quick questions? I was
We're gonna-
very, very sad. We had a very lengthy discussion, 2 or 3 hours. I was on the phone with him today, and I was very confident what he's doing. And he said this has been reinforced, and a couple of times he's done this. So I think the number is very, very valid.
I really like Chavez. He, there are a lot of, as we talked about yesterday, there's a lot of flaky research being done in sociology, and Chavez is really, he's not flaky. He really knows how to get the real numbers.
And he's accepted that maybe in the future he'll come speak to us personally, but it may be.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. Okay. Now we're open.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hi, Roy. Can you see me?
Yes, I do.
I'm Jane. I interviewed you on the phone.
Oh, great. Hi, Jane. Hi. You
I
did such a great job with that announcement. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to ask, is it really only 2% that they give, that these Christian charities give? That seems awfully small. I mean, it's insignificant. In other words, the Christian charities are liars.
Can I make one comment? The 2%, I want to make a caveat. The 2% is only the financial, the money. It does not include any time, any space, etc. It's the financial amount. So if they gave free time, things of that type, that's not part of the $1,300. Okay?
Yeah, it's interesting when you go through these numbers. One of the things that struck me reading the books on this topic was even when they talk about how generous Christians are, the ones who go to church, the church that makes them so generous, even those people, the amount that people actually contribute to humanitarian causes is not really very amazing. Like, there's this myth about people tithing. People think that there's all these people out there that give 10% of their income to their church, for example. That's extremely rare. Extremely rare. Nobody gives 10% to their church, and even if there's some people who end up in these categories of Christians who donate a lot of money to charity, you're talking about something like you're talking about a typical donations from a household of say $1,000 a year from a family where the income is $50,000. So these are small amounts of donation. We're not talking about Christians, people who go to church, become people who will literally give you the shirt off their back. No, they're not. We're not talking about that scale of generosity. We're talking about statistical variations, small variations in how much people are likely to donate to nonprofit organizations, and the amounts are actually very modest.
I have one question, one comment. You're assuming that they're giving out of generosity, but they also could be giving out of fear. And how does one actually sort of parcel out their altruistic versus their fear motivation?
Oh, thank you for that. That's actually a huge. That issue affects a lot of this data. For example, when people report that they go to church often, I mean, do they go to church because they're religious types of people, or do they go because they are afraid not to go because all their neighbors will hate them if they don't go?
Well, I think there are little old ladies
People report that they put money in the collection plate on a Sunday. Are they putting money in the collection plate because they believe in Jesus, or are they putting money in the collection plate because they'll look bad if they don't? So
I think there are
really hard to
cases
tell
where
what the influences are on people.
and I think there are cases where people who miss one Sunday at church actually go through like some kind of traumatic reaction because they're afraid that missing. That it's the same thing that you're talking about. Is that it's that fear that's ingrained. That I don't know why. If people are going to worship a God, they should at least worship a grown-up. But I've known people who actually miss a Sunday at church, and they're really broken up about it. I mean, they're really upset and traumatized by it. And I think it's part of that same picture.
Yeah. So people are afraid, and in a way, the central feature of religion is fear. That's kind of the main thing about it. That's the primary feature. Not generosity, it's fear.
I just have a general question. Why is our government in the adoption business to start with?
Our government?
Why are they giving all this money to Catholic charities for them to use to help adoptions? So that goes to something tangential, I know.
Yeah.
More of a comment than a question.
I think it's just part of the larger package, really. You know, the adoption's a part of it.
That's a case of the government trying to outsource a program to an organization that they think will be good at handling it. So they think that Catholic charities are good at the adoption thing, and I don't know if they are actually good at that. I mean, they have, you know, yeah.
Steve?
A couple of comments. Well, first of all, I very much enjoyed the interview. As for the hospitals, it seems to me there's a tremendous number of secular hospitals. I see hospitals all the time that don't say anything about St. Francis or Mount Sinai. So I think we can count most of those on our side.
Yeah, we can count most hospitals. You know, some of the biggest, you know, one of the biggest nonprofit organizations in the world is the Mayo Clinic. That's a nonprofit, that's a secular organization. And like I said earlier, yesterday, most hospitals, hospitals in general, do not, you know, they don't provide religious medicine. They aren't really religious organizations. It's misleading to talk about Catholic hospitals because they aren't Catholic in the way they operate. Except when if you're a woman who's dying and they won't give you an abortion even though you're dying, then that's a Catholic behavior. But in general, the so-called Catholic hospitals, they're only called Catholic because they're affiliated with some sort of Catholic, well, basically a corporation, some giant corporation that owns this hospital, and it calls itself Catholic, and so the hospital ends up being called Catholic, but there's no real connection with religion. So in a way, there's no such thing as a Catholic hospital.
And as for the religious people acting out of fear, there's also that they're bribed. I mean, the way to control people is to threaten them and to bribe them. And with religion, it doesn't cost you any money. You can promise them everlasting salvation or everlasting damnation, and it doesn't cost you a dime.
Yeah. Yeah, religion is a wonderful product because you can claim absolutely any benefit for it.
In the area of the hospitals, we have a very serious problem, actually across the United States, with the consolidation of many hospitals that's going on. And when they try to consolidate a Catholic hospital with a secular hospital, they always keep their legacy going. And part of the merger is they must not have family planning services in the combined hospital. And a lot of these have become real problems. For example, in New York City, we had the one down in Greenwich Village, was at St. Vincent's, which was known for treating a lot of people with HIV, HIV causing, and they were going bankrupt. So they were trying to merge that hospital with another one, and it so happened it ultimately went out of business, the hospital, because they wanted to make sure that anyone who merged with them would not give family planning services, and so it went out of business. So we're having this all over the country now, where there might be, in some communities, a Catholic hospital, and some others, they won't give it up, and they'll have to go out of business otherwise.
Maybe someday there will be a law that says that if you're you can't call yourself a hospital unless you provide, the full range of services. You can't just say, yeah, we'll help you if you're straight, but not if you're gay, and things like that. If you say things like that, then you don't get to be a hospital, and you can't be a nonprofit. You can't, and you can't get federal funding. Right now, you can do crazy things like that and still get federal funding.
Of course, now in Virginia, they're trying to legalize state rape, where women who are seeking abortions must undergo a what they call I guess a
The governor
trans.
today changed that.
He dialed it back
He
somewhat.
dialed it back. It'll be an external, not an internal.
Oh, it'll be an external rape as opposed to an internal rape. Okay, well, I guess that makes it better. Go ahead. You can adjust that mic, by the way.
I
Just good.
don't want to break anything. Hi,
It's all
my
right,
name
we
is
break it, we're-
Marianne Webb, and I'm new to New York. I've been an atheist for some time. I'm also have a science and a mathematical background. I really enjoyed your talk and the preview that we had beforehand. And most of it I agree with. I mean, at least I want it to be so true, because anything kind of that goes against the church's good deeds makes it smile.
Right.
So, I mean, I had a few points personally that make it seem realistic that the church or religious people are seen as more generous. First of all, I think there's a donation of time and money that has to be factored in. But the church, if I'm going to donate, I'm not that generous. I don't wake up and think, oh, I need to donate $50 today. Let me go and find something to donate to. I'm more kind of lazy on that factor, and I wait for somebody to come and ask me for money or some opportunity to arise. And I think if you go to church every day, every week, and then you get mails from your church saying, can we have some money for this product or that project or whatever, just my frequency of donation would increase if my requests for money increased. So I think there's a balance there that could be factored into your discussion. I think also